everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Sean Hearn. I'm the Executive Director here of the Babe Ruth Birthplace Foundation. And last night over dinner, a bunch of us were sitting around, and I recalled a story. And it made me think that maybe I should share that with you. 7 years ago, I received a telephone call. It was at 5 o'clock on a Friday night in the middle of January. I was in the process of leaving my office. And lights were already out, already had the bag on my shoulder, and I saw a call come in from Herndon, Nevada. And I thought, Herndon, Nevada, who do I know in Herndon, Nevada? And I thought, oh. So I answered the call, and I heard, Sean, it's Julia.
Pick your mic up, Sean. Raise it up.
Raise it up?
Yeah. No. Right here on the torch now. Yeah, just take it up.
All right, is that better?
Yeah.
All right, so the call, and on the other end of the call, there was this voice that said, Sean, it's Julia, Babe Ruth's daughter. And she offered her congratulations to me for about 30 seconds. And the remaining 44 minutes that we were on the call, she explained to me the enormous responsibility that I now had to perpetuate her daddy's legacy. Her words, not mine. And as I was thinking last night, today is a celebration of this institution. It's the 50th anniversary celebration of this institution. But everyone here, all of you in some way, in some form, have played a part in perpetuating Babe's legacy. And for that, I thank every one of you. There are friends here who have been with this institution for decades. There are new friends. There are neighbors here. There are some of our board members, our former board members. All of you are here because in some way you've touched this institution. And I'm so grateful to see all of you here today. Today is the celebration of the 50th anniversary of this institution, and it's a rededication of the mission to preserve and interpret and celebrate Babe Ruth, but also all of Maryland sports. Today, we continue to learn new things about the Babe, and we're trying to find new ways to share his life with the public. For example, this house and this neighborhood. This house, and I want to thank Jackson Gilman Forlini, the Historic Preservation Officer from the city of Baltimore, who helped with this research. But this house was built in 1854 by a man named William Linton, who sold it to Caleb Kelly for the whopping sum of $700. And just like today, the end units sold for a little bit more. They sold for the whopping sum of $900. Somewhere in the 1870s, this house here was leased to Babe's grandparents, Pius and Johanna Schomburger, who had come to this country from Germany in 1854. When Babe was born here on February 6, 1895, Ridgely's Delight reflected Baltimore in the 1890s. The Irish had started arriving in the 1840s, and due to the potato famine in Ireland, many tenant farmers lost everything, and they risked everything and headed to America. In Baltimore, they found the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and as farmers, they were used to the hard physical work that was required to clear land, lay tracks, build tunnels and bridges. And they settled in this neighborhood, as well as the neighborhood over by the Montclair shops. The Germans also came during this same period, but for reasons very different from the Irish. They were seeking greater religious freedom that they had found in Germany, and unlike the Irish, many of them brought needed skills as weavers, blacksmiths, tailors, butchers, carpenters, brewers, shoemakers, and like Babe's grandfather Pius, and upholsterers. Free blacks also lived here. Even before the Civil War, African Americans were moving to Baltimore, finding work as laborers, waiters, porters, and they moved into this neighborhood in particular. The B&O Railroad, the wine and shops, and the brickyards of Southwest Baltimore offered opportunities to earn some money and to escape the horrors of the agricultural life they'd experienced in the South. It was a diverse neighborhood that Babe was born into by a German midwife named Minnie Graff. More on Minnie later. His grandfather Pius and grandmother Johanna lived here in this house, and although Johanna would die in 1900, Pius in 1904, Babe's parents would divorce in 1906, and Babe would be sent to St. Mary's Industrial School in West Baltimore. And for those of you who don't know where that is, it's across the street from what is now St. Agnes Hospital. He was sent there in 1902. But this was Babe's neighborhood, At the time that George was sent to St. Mary's, his parents operated a bar at what is now the corner of the Hilton Hotel, facing the ballpark. While he's at St. Mary's, his father is operating a bar which is now center field of the ballpark. And in 1914, when young George is signed by the Baltimore Orioles to begin his professional baseball career, his father was living on Conway Street, which is now on Russell, facing the main entrance to the ballpark. Kind of creepy when you think about Babe Ruth landmarks that completely surround a ballpark that would not be built for another 100 years. But the Ruths aren't the only ones living here. In 1895, Casper Scheinblein, a shoemaker, lives here at 212. Hans Heed, an upholsterer, lives at 214, just like Pius and Johanna Schomburger at 216. And Luke O'Rourke, a commercial merchant, and his wife Rosanna lived at 218. And we know at 622 Dover Street, Caroline Weindorf lived there. She was a grocer. In the 700 block of Dover, we know that Abraham Trusty, a laborer, Liberia Cornish, a physician, and William Cooper, a porter, all lived. All three were African American. And we know about some of the businesses on Pratt Street, Emory Street, Portland. We know that 312 Emory, Charles and Mary Mueller ran 3 different businesses. He was a wine importer and a loan officer, and she ran a small grocery store. At 633 Pratt Street, which is now the dining room of the Penn restaurant just around the corner, Louise Cran operated his tailor shop. And right next door, which is the main entrance to the Penn restaurant, Mattia Palmer ran a saloon and a cigar manufacturing business. And of course, right behind all of you today and what I'm looking at, there were foundries on Pratt Street. There was a barrel making business right here, carpenter shops across the street, and a furniture store where you could buy furniture on consignment. They, like Babe, all left an imprint on this neighborhood and in this city. And we're very proud to now be able to share some of that information with the public. So, as the executive director, now let me share with you some of the things that we are looking to do in the next 18 months. Through the incredible support of Delegate Lewis and Senator Ferguson, and thank you to both of their offices who are here today, we will begin construction on a virtual classroom and studio that will allow us to offer museum programming to schools that are either prohibited financially or geographically from visiting the museum. That means schools in our city, that means schools in our state, and all around the world. And I want to thank Delegate Lewis in particular for making that possible. A new film, 1914, will premiere in the museum's theater, focusing on the events and developments leading to Ruth's first year in professional baseball. Babe Ruth is Baltimore's. He was born here, he learned baseball here, and he was discovered by our Baltimore Orioles. And the world needs to know that. We're going to explore the neighborhood, as we just talked about. We're going to offer in-person and virtual programming on a wide range of topics. And we're working with our neighbors here in Ridgely's Delight, and I'm happy to see a bunch of them here today, and the city of Baltimore and BGE about improving the streetscape here on Emory Street that will include developing interpretive panels on these walls that will highlight our ballparks and stadiums found in Baltimore throughout the years. It'll allow us to shine a spotlight not only on our current Orioles, Ravens, and Blast, but on the teams of the past, like our Negro League Black Sox and Eli Giants, our International League Orioles, Bullets, Skipjacks, and of course our Colts, Stars, and Stallions. We are going to continue research that has been started by Ernestine Miller and Bill Jenkinson and Jane Levy regarding Babe's relationship with the African American community. And if anyone would like to contribute, we are creating an internship that will further guide and record that research. We are hoping that within a year or two, we'll be able to host a national event on that very subject. And the museum plans to unveil a new holographic presentation in our historic room where Ruth was born. The hologram will depict Minnie Graff, the midwife who assisted Kate Ruth in the birth of her son. This will help visitors better understand healthcare and women's professions in the late 19th century. And finally, as we prepare for America 250 in 2026, we will continue to explore the life and legacy of Babe Ruth, the greatest baseball player of all time, the benchmark for whom all major leaguers measure themselves against, his legacy, and ultimately his rise as an American icon. So again, I thank you for being here today. It is my pleasure to host you all. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the co-chairman of our board, Mr. Bob McKinney.
Thanks, John. Can everyone hear? You're not going to record this because this isn't important. Now, I want to welcome everyone and then piggyback on what Sean has said. We're here today because it's 50 years that this institution, which is just not a city institution, a state institution, or a national institution, it's an international institution. And I'm sure if you take the tour, you'll see what that means. Babe Ruth is, and I posed the question earlier, who's the most famous Baltimorean of all time? And I think if you dig deep, you'll come up with, it has to be George Herman Babe Ruth. So we thank you all for turning out today. I am particularly, this is Defenders Day, right, Mr. Mayor? And Baltimore had a pretty significant place in history about 210 years ago. Okay, I just did the math. But George Herman Ruth probably knew nothing about all that. But anyway, I do want to welcome you on behalf of the board. My co-chair is Barry Gossett. I don't know if Barry is here or not. I haven't seen him. But on the current board of directors and the many past members of the board that are here, would you all stand up if you can? I told Wally Pinkert he was going to have to throw out the first pitch, but apparently his shoulder surgery prohibits that. But I do want to thank everyone for being here, and I do have the honor of introducing some of the dignitaries who are with us today. I will start with Delegate Mark Edelson. Edelson, excuse me. I told you I was going to do that. Edelson. A great friend to the museum for many, many years. Sandy Rosenberg, Delegate. And representing Delegate Robin Lewis, and this is a good one, Begonia. She just said Begonia. Petra Chorman. Is that close? Yes. That's close. I don't think that's it, but it's close. From the council, we have Eric Costello, who is the councilman for this district and has recently come on board as a board member of the museum. We appreciate it. I have not seen Councilwoman Felicia Porter. I don't know if she's here. And last but certainly not least, he left his honeymoon for this. Our Mayor Brandon Scott. Now it is my honor to introduce a longtime advocate, champion, man who has passion for the mission of the Babe Ruth Museum, who's been here, I think he mentioned 42 years. Does that sound right? Okay. Our chair, our executive director emeritus, Mike Gibbons.
Thank you, RL.
Welcome, MJ.
All righty. Hello, everyone. My name's Mike, and I work here, and I welcome all of you. So I have been here 42 years, and I was trying to figure out how to go about this without boring you to death. But Sean brought up a good point. This institution only survives because of all of us. That's it. Without all of us, it doesn't work. And recently, somebody came up to me and said, how did you put this impressive collection of state sports memorabilia together? And I said, it's because of people. It's because of people getting to know people, establishing relationships, and earning trust. So I'm going to talk with you about people a little bit. He's given me 6 minutes. I'm going to try for 7, although you went 8. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. In the late 60s, the press secretary for Mayor D'Alessandro read a piece in the paper that said that the Babe Ruth house was going to be demolished as part of the renovation of the Ridgely's Delight community. So he went to the mayor and told him about it, and D'Alessandro said, send out a press release nationally, ask the people what they want to do with the Babe Ruth house. And the response was overwhelming. People from all over the country started sending in cash donations, checks, things like that. So the mayor said, okay, we've got a live one. And he went and recruited a local PR guy by the name of Paul Welsh to head up a committee to raise funds to renovate these 4 buildings and then to create the Babe Ruth Shrine. And he did it by 1974 with a major boost from Babe's widow, Claire. On July 19th, they cut a ribbon, they went in, and that is the official launching of the Babe Ruth Birthplace and Shrine. Come back here. All right, so now I'm going to ask you to fast forward. We're going to go to 1982. Are you all still with me a little bit? This is a Villager's microphone stand, by the way, Patty. In 1982, I'm doing a documentary on Babe Ruth, and I come here to do some research, and I meet the chairman of the board at the time, a guy named John Foster. And Johnny told me, and I was down here multiple times, that the birthplace was in decline. Attendance was like 2,000 people a year, and they would have somebody at the desk and would take your dollar, and then you came in, and that was it. There was no real management of the organization. And they told me that Baltimore people had stopped coming. You know, the gleam was off. Once you came and you saw it, that was it. You know, why would you come back unless something changed? And it dawned on me that I didn't think that the Baltimore Orioles, hello Stetka, had a museum. A guy by the name of Jim Brady, who worked for the Baltimore Sun and is Baltimore's all-time ultimate baseball historian. Jim is long gone, but a dear friend back in the day. He took me to the Orioles PR guy, Bob Brown, and I pitched it. I said, look, Babe Ruth was discovered by the Baltimore Orioles in 1914. There is a connection. We would like to be your museum. He said, sounds good to me. And so he took me to the general manager of the team, Hank Peters. Hank Peters said, let's get to work. They had one artifact. The team had one artifact. It was the document that admitted them to the American League for the 1954 season. It's on display in the building. You need to go look at it. But anyway, so we became the Orioles official museum. We closed the museum for about 6 months, put Orioles exhibits in, moved the Babe Ruth stuff around, and off we went. So it was the beginning of a great ride. Along the way, they said, well, you're the only one that knows what you did, so can you stick around for a while and be the executive director? I didn't know what that meant, but I said, I guess, sure, what the heck, you know, we'll do it. Greg Schwallenberg was my staffer and my dear friend, and the two of us went about building a collection, creating exhibits, and things like that. Now, in the meantime, the Baltimore Colts leave town in 1984. Boom. We didn't like that, did we? Mm-hmm. And so William Donald Schaefer, who I had gotten to know over here, he was just a hands-on mayor, as are you. And he called me one day and he said, Gibbons, I've got the Baltimore Colts archives in a Mayflower moving van in front of City Hall. I got it back from Robert Earsay. I need you to come down here and inventory the collection to make sure that he didn't abscond with something. So Greg and I go into the Mayflower, and everything was there, including Super Bowl V trophy and a lot of really good stuff. So Schaefer was happy, and he said, Gibbons, you're now the official archives of the Baltimore Colts. And you can see that there's a pattern developing here. So I'll move along as quickly as I can. We get to 1991, the last year at Memorial Stadium. We are trying to establish our brand as the Orioles Museum. And my wife, Sandy, God bless her, she's right back here. Sandy Marks, give us a wave. Love you, dear. Sandy kind of knew what I was doing, and she said, why don't you go to WBAL, the Orioles flagship station, and see if they would produce or let you produce Baltimore baseball minutes. So I went to Jeff Beauchamp, and the station manager, he said, yeah, you can do that. For every Orioles game, 162 games a year, for 23 years, we did Baltimore baseball minutes. Doug Roberts, a local actor, trained me. John Patty, God bless you, he's over here, was our production engineer. And so off we went. And that really did help with the branding for sure. And speaking of media, I can't tell you the level of wonderful support that we've had from local and national media. I'm going to read you some names. You're going to know most of them. But these people all came to bat for the Babe Ruth Museum. Guys like John Stedman, Michael Lesker, Chuck Thompson, John Miller, Mike Popovic, Johnny Holliday, Jim Henneman, and on and on and on. They just have always been here for us. And without them, I don't think we could have done this at all. Okay, I'm on page 2, second page. This is it. Okay, so let me move to around 1990, as we're doing the baseball minutes. The Orioles hire Janet Marie Smith, a name that we all know. And Bob Brown got in touch and said, you need to be her history arm. She wants to develop Oriole Park to reflect historic ballparks around, in baseball. And so Greg and I took off and did that and worked with Janet Marie. And then we got involved, doing some of the stuff. John Hine is here. John used to lead construction tours of Oriole Park. And then the ball club asked me to write the dedication speech for Oriole Park. And I got to thinking about that. This is 3 years after Field of Dreams. And I thought, why don't I'll write a speech calling Oriole Park our new Field of Dreams, right? It kind of made sense to me. But the only way it works is if James Earl Jones comes to Baltimore to read the speech. And they agreed. So James comes in. We went back and forth. There was no email back then. He was in London. But he came into Baltimore. He read the speech. The Morgan State Choir backed him up. And he was incredible. And he has just passed away. And what a loss for all of us that is. But the one thing that he did that we didn't like, we put him in a big boot pal jersey. And that sucker took the jersey back to California. and that was that. We never saw it again. Please, James, send it back. And he didn't do that. In 1995, with a tremendous assist from the Oriole Advocates and board members like Ray Weinstein, Jill McGovern, Ernestine Miller, Del Ritchie, they work with the staff to produce a year's worth of activities celebrating Babe's 100th birthday. That is where I, for the first time, met Julia Ruth Stevens, Babe's daughter, and Tom Stevens, this guy sitting right out here today, his grandson. So they came in for the events. We hosted a fall gala featuring 28 Hall of Famers from Cooperstown, the largest gathering of Hall of Fame guys ever outside of Cooperstown. That was pretty special. Now, 2000. The state gives us the task of taking apart Memorial Stadium before they demolish it. And what that means is we pull all the historic stuff out, including both foul poles. One of them is over at Oriole Park. The right field foul pole was at Memorial Stadium, by the way. The other one is in Aberdeen at Ripken Stadium. But anyway, and then we're to take everything apart and sell the seats and benches and bricks and all that stuff. And I hired John Zeman, Baltimore Colts band, Ravens band guy now, to head up that project. He and I had met at WMAR-TV, and so John got involved, and then he introduced us to John Unitas, and ultimately the Unitas collection came to the Babe Ruth Museum, adding on and enhancing our Baltimore Colts archives. You see how this works. Now, 2003, we're working on the Sports Legends Museum projects with guys like Bob Hillman and John Moog and Sandy Rosenberg and Wally and Marianne Pinker. Pinkard, and we wanted a University of Maryland presence. So people made that happen. They introduced us to a guy named Jack Zane, who was the retired sports information director at Maryland. I know this is way too complicated, but I have to do this, you understand? But Jack became an instant friend of all of us and opened up the Maryland archives. And we have a lot of Maryland stuff here. And they became a big part of our sports legends story over there. In 2005, with an incredible staff, including Greg and Sean Hearn and John Hine and Ed Meerholtz and Paul and Teresa Egbert and Dean Krimmel and Orioles historian Bill Stetka and design architect Peter Sologub, we opened Sports Legends Museum in historic Camden Station. It housed our growing collection and represented Maryland's unique sports heritage. Even the Preakness was in there. Can't do that right now. A couple of more highlights, and then I'm out of here. In 2010, museum board member Henry Rosenberg and his assistant Andy Lapioker came to us and said, we want to build a Brooks Robinson statue, and we want you guys to oversee the project. And we said, okay, we'll do that. We set up a special account, a restricted account, so that the money went where it was supposed to go. And in the fall of 2011, the Brooks Robinson statue featuring the Gold Glove was erected and stands proudly over at Oriole, right outside of Oriole Park by Pickles Pub. We really enjoyed that job. Thank you, Andy. Where are you? Where's old Andrew? He's back. Andy left. No, he didn't. In 2015, working with project coordinator Sam Polikoff and with the Pinkards, we completed a $1 million renovation of this building and brought it into the 21st century. That's a good thing for this. It really needed to be done. And the last mention, a couple of years ago, we began displaying a rare Babe Ruth rookie card, one of the sport's most valuable collectibles. And how did that happen? It was relationships. A good friend and former board member by the name of Rich Rubin loaned us a rookie card to put on public display. It has generated incredible attention for the last couple of years. And Rich, we really thank you for your participation. And also for the Jimmy Dykes jersey that's on display as part of our Orioles 70th anniversary exhibit. Over the past couple of years, we have enjoyed the steady guidance of co-chairman Bob McKinney and Barry Gossett and the board of directors, and hired staffer Katie Dick, and welcomed dynamic board member Steve Wecker to our ranks, as well as development aces Joe DeBlasi and Keith Cavanaugh. Truly, godsend additions for Sean, Scott Mattingly, me, and, Mary, and volunteers like Peter, Emmy, Charles, Mike, and Ruth. So thank you all for that. Now, that's it for me, but I will leave you with this one note. Our son Mike sometimes says, Dad, remember, you work at a row house. Indeed, my friends often ask, why are you still working at the row house? And my answer is, in my 42 years on the job here, I've never considered what I do work. This has always been about passion. And I thank each and every one of you for enabling that passion to continue to this day. And that's it. Now, my last job is to turn the microphone over to Babe Ruth's grandson, our dear friend, and I hope you can read that, Tom Stevens. Come on up, Tom.
Hey, y'all. I'd first like to thank Sean and the museum for inviting me to come and speak with you today about my absolute favorite subject in the world. I also must give my wife Anita a shout because you see, as with your mayor, who's on his honeymoon, well, today is my 51st wedding anniversary. And she didn't join me. Matter of fact, she very willingly gave me her permission to come. And as I think about it now, I think she was a little too willing. I well remember how thrilled my grandmother Claire was that people would want to do this for her husband. So she did everything in her power to assist the museum in any way that she could over the following 2 years until her passing. My mother Julia was of course the same. Whenever Mike called to request an appearance or a book signing, she was always happy to comply. And Mike, for his part, took great pleasure in hosting her and squiring her around Baltimore in their never-ending search for the perfect Long Island iced tea. I first became acquainted with the museum through several visits in 1995 during the Babe's 100th birthday celebration. I got to know your mayor, Kurt Schmoke. I got to meet some of the awesome friends and supporters that the museum is so lucky to have, like Del and Joanne Ritchie, and Ernestine Miller. I was present for the unveiling of Babe's Dream, Susan Lurie's sculpture of a young, up-and-coming Babe just starting out as a left-handed pitcher for the Orioles. I was especially surprised to learn that to that point in time, Babe's Dream was the only statue of Babe in the whole world. Happily, this has since been rectified as there are now 4 statues in all, when you include Tokyo, Hot Springs, Arkansas, and Waco, Texas. Over the ensuing years, it has been our pleasure to further support Mike and now Sean by adding to the museum's collection of artifacts. This has included the Sports Illustrated Player of the Century Award in 1999 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2018. Given their significance, there was never any question of taking possession of either of these awards. It was clear that they must be loaned to the museum and shared with the Babe's fan. And so it was with Claire's wedding dress from 1929. It had to be shared. It has simply been languishing in a closet since her passing in 1976. The museum put together a beautiful exhibit, and my son Brent was honored to make the dedication back in 2017. I'm told that these exhibits have proven to be very popular with the fans. I really must commend both Sean and Mike for the fantastic job they've done and continue to do, especially the creative events that they conjure up in the ongoing effort to keep the museum funded. Where would the museum have been without them? While we're here today to recognize 50 years of success for the museum, it's also an opportunity for me to celebrate the legacy of the man who was born here and last wore a player's uniform almost 90 years ago. But make no mistake, Babe Ruth is hardly a dusty relic. Scarcely a day goes by that sports writers and announcers fail to mention his name in the context of all-time baseball superlatives. He is still as relevant to the game of baseball as he has ever been, and for multiple reasons. Computers permit us to crunch numbers like never before, and this has given rise to new metrics and means to evaluate a player's value and productivity, such as wins above replacement, WAR. By whatever the method of evaluation, the Babe is most frequently still at the forefront and often by a considerable margin. He's certainly relevant to Japanese baseball. During the 2021-22 baseball seasons, sports writers in both the U.S. and Japan began making the inevitable comparisons of Babe, the two-way player Shohei Ohtani. Interested in what the Ruth family thought, various Japanese media, including Fuji TV and the Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper, requested no less than 15 interviews over the approximately a year's time. And I'm sure, Sean, you gave your share too. To our continual surprise and delight, the Babe is still well known globally, even in the developing world. My profession as a civil engineer took me overseas to reside and work in countries that do not care one iota about baseball. Nevertheless, within 2 weeks of moving to Thailand, I encountered pictures of him in both a Bangkok restaurant and a country club. While designing and constructing strategic bridges for our military in Afghanistan, I learned that the South African and Australian paramilitary personnel safeguarding my bridge sites were quite familiar with Babe because they were cricket fans. As it happens, the greatest batsman of all time in the sport of cricket was a gentleman by the name of Sir Don Bradman, who was even knighted for his many accomplishments. But I was told that in his home country of Australia, he's known as the Babe Ruth of cricket. It was perhaps become cliche to say, but clearly his celebrity has come to transcend his sport. So I think it's fair to say that as long as there's baseball, there will be Babe Ruth. When it came to interacting with African Americans, I'm really pleased to be able to say that just by being himself, the Babe was quite progressive for his era. At a time when many white ball players refused to even play against Negro leaguers, he was perfectly happy to play exhibition games and to barnstorm with them. In fact, he played in some 16 games, went 25 for 54, and hit 11 home runs. Black newspapers declared him, quote, a friend of the race. He counted Joe Louis and Belle Bojangles Robinson among his friends. Hall of Famer Judy Johnson once said of Babe, he was quite a guy. All the guys really liked him, but we could never get him out no matter what we did. Reportedly, when he faced Satchel Paige, he took him so deep that Satchel was waiting at home plate to shake his hand. So if I hear, we'll never know how Babe Ruth really was, how good he was because he never played against the great bat ball players, I have a ready response. I thought it would be kind of fun to share with you some of Babe's lesser-known traits and characteristics that I've heard about over the years. Ball players can be a superstitious lot, and the Babe was no exception. Between innings, he always made sure he touched second base on his way in to the dugout from right field, as if to say, "I'll be seeing you." The Babe himself said, "I have just one superstition. I make sure I touch all the bases when I hit a home run." It would seem that he had a sense of humor as well. And I'm going to add this. It isn't even in my paper. Kind of a funny story. Billy Werber was the last living ball player to have played with Babe, and this was obviously in the early 30s, in the twilight of Babe's career with the Yankees. Billy Werber was a little guy and really quite fast, and he's just starting out with them. So he gets up and he gets on, and the outer order comes around to Babe. Babe hits one out, and off Billy Werber goes. He's just as fast as he can be. And there he is in the dugout, and Babe hasn't even hit second base. So Babe comes on in, sits down, and actually pats him on the head and says, "You don't have to run like that when the baby hits one." Mother told me what a wonderful dancer he was, and he taught her the waltz and foxtrot. It says a lot, I think, that he took the trouble to learn how to ballroom dance. He certainly didn't learn it at St. Mary's. And he also taught her how to bowl and took her to football and hockey games. She also told me about how organized he was. At night, he would empty his pants pockets and lay everything out on the top of his bureau in readiness for the next day. He was also extremely punctual and had little patience for those who weren't. He gave late arrivals 20 minutes and then was on his way. It's been estimated that Babe received the academic equivalent of a sixth grade education at St. Mary's, and he came to deeply regret this. Given the social circles he went on to move in as an adult, he frequently found himself embarrassed by his lack of education, and truly was on a perpetual learning curve for all of his adult life. Despite this shortcoming, my mother described him as an intelligent and an inquisitive man who continually tried to better himself intellectually and stay abreast of current events and topics. We have endowed a scholarship at my former high school in his name, and I think he might be kind of pleased. We know that at St. Mary's he was trained to be a tailor. One summer, my mother was going away to camp, and she needed a blanket for her bunk. The Babe actually sewed her a quilt, and then pointed the finger at her and said, "If you tell anyone about this, you're grounded for life." He actually was very strict, and even as an adult, Mother continued to have a curfew of 12 midnight until she got married. He knew what guys were up to. By all accounts, he was a lot of fun to be around. Barrel of monkeys and a big brass band all rolled into one. As we well know, he was magic around kids. He could be at ease with them, and they with him. They wouldn't judge him. Biographer Bill Jenkinson recounted to me something, this is extraordinary, something he would do at ball games. He would buy all the kids in the bleachers hot dogs and soda pop. And then he'd go up and he'd sit with them and talk to them. And not just at Yankee Stadium, he did this at away games too. I think that's remarkable. There have been many memorable quotes about the Babe over the years by writers as varied as Grantland Rice and Ford Frick. My favorite comes from Red Sox pitcher Harry Hooper, who was one of the Babe's very earliest teammates. Sometimes I still can't believe what I saw. This 19-year-old kid, crude, poorly educated, only lightly brushed by the social veneer that we call civilization, gradually transformed into the idol of American youth and the symbol of baseball the world over. A man loved by more people and with an intensity of feeling that perhaps has never been equaled before or since. My mother and grandmother had to have been the Babe's biggest cheerleaders. Both spoke of him so frequently and with such affection, and they still missed him right up until their deaths. From her earliest recollection of him until her passing, my mom was head over heels about Babe Ruth. She simply adored him. And even when she was in her hundreds, as you've heard, she still called him Daddy. Before she passed in 2019, I asked her, "Mom, what would you like me to tell people about Babe after you're gone?" She replied, "Make sure you tell them what a great guy he was." I hope I've managed to convey something of that to you today. And of course, best wishes to the museum for another 50 years of success. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. As we've said throughout this so far, we have had and enjoyed the great support of the city of Baltimore. This project was launched over 50 years ago by Mayor D'Alessandro. Two more mayors oversaw it before we finally opened the door, and for the past 50 years, we've enjoyed the support of the city of Baltimore. So it is my pleasure, like we did 50 years ago when we opened this museum, let me introduce to you the mayor of the great city of Baltimore, Mr. Brandon Scott.
Thank you very much, and there is nothing that can be said after what Tom said. Thank you very much for that. For me, as a sports lover, as a baseball lover, I appreciate that, but also more importantly, as a family man who loves and adores his grandfather the same way as you, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. That was great. I thought I knew all Babe Ruth stories, but now I know even more today because of you. What a gorgeous day it is for us to celebrate 50 years and us honoring one of Baltimore's favorite sons, the Sultan of SWAT, the Colossus of Clout, the great Bambino, Babe Ruth. And when we talk about Baltimore being a sports town, we know that that legacy runs deep. As much as we love our sports teams, it's not just about the Ravens' legendary Super Bowl wins, the team that shall never be named again and their wins when they were here, the ballpark that changed America in Camden Yards, and dare I say it, even us winning when we had a CFL team when I was a young kid. Baltimore, that basketball team that hasn't won since they left and went to D.C., and they've been struggling ever since. The Crabs are not as good in D.C. as they are in Baltimore. But Baltimore is very, very, very proud of our sports history. And we understand that it's deeper than that. It's about the sportsmanship, the competitiveness, the history that runs deep in our veins, but also we're a place where our athletes, whether they are just born here or whether they play here, truly become a part of the fabric of the city and in our community. And Babe Ruth's connection to our city is a very, very deep, important part of that. I am incredibly honored to be here with Tom, representing his entire family, everyone representing the museum team. I can just sit here all day and hear sports stories all day long. I have to think about what kind of Baltimore sports memorabilia I have lying around my house. I might have some old CFL Stallion stubs I can bring you guys or something. But I could sit here all day and hear that. But for a half a century, this place has stood the test of time to help tell that history, to honor our sports heroes in the way that they deserve to be honored, to tell the stories in the way that only Baltimoreans can tell them, and to ensure that we absolutely forget them or the barriers that they broke. Sports brings us together in a way that a few things can. And Baltimore is a city that, regardless of whatever else is happening in the world or the city or our neighborhood, we all come together around sports. We're going to do that as we go to the World Series this year and the Super Bowl at the beginning of next year. Sports is a beautiful thing that has helped our city get through some of the toughest time that we've ever faced. And I'm proud to help ensure that the small part of this testament to sports history plays will continue for many, many, many years to come. And I'm also proud to say, albeit my forever mayor, Kirk Smoke, was a great quarterback, I probably am the best baseball playing mayor that the city of Baltimore has ever had. Thank you all again. This would not be possible without each and every one of you and your dedication. And thank you for your support. Now it's time for us to, again, rename a street in Baltimore.
Excellent.